Quite an introduction. It's good to be back with all of you. It feels like coming home again, always. And it's nice, I kind of got to bookend Reverend Sue's sabbatical. I was here almost the first week or the second week that she was left, and then now I'm here the week before she comes back. So it'll be fun to welcome her back next week and hear about all of her experience on her sabbatical. I've been reflecting, Jeannie was talking to the kids, and my son is now 14. I was pregnant when I was here at Columbine, and he's going into high school this week. And I've been reflecting on his journey through school. And one of the precious moments that came to mind in relationship to what I want to share today was he was in a Waldorf preschool. And every year we did this lantern walk that is based on the Festival of Martimas, which happens on November 11th. And the kids would carry their lamp in the dark down the path, and we'd sing songs. And it happens at the time of the year when the days are short, right? And there's lots of darkness. And it's such a beautiful reminder of bringing our light to the darkness. Bringing our light when times get dark. And so it's no wonder that sometime earlier this year I was perusing a book table, and you know how books jump off the shelf at us, right? They do at me anyway. I found this beautiful little book, The Lamp in the Darkness, Illuminating the Path Through Difficult Times by Jack Kornfield. And for those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's a Buddhist teacher and trained Buddhist monk, beautiful author, and just a beautiful light in this world. So I've been working intimately with this book the last couple months in my own work, and I want us to explore together today really how to bring that lamp of wisdom to those dark, difficult times in our lives and bring our light to that. And why is it important for us to kind of pause and reflect on the wisdom of those difficulties? Here's why. Here's what Jack says. He says, need my glasses for this one. If you can sit quietly after difficult news, if in financial downturns you remain perfectly calm, if you can see your neighbors travel to fantastic places without a twinge of jealousy, if you can happily eat whatever is put on your plate, if you can fall asleep after a day of running around without a drink or a pill, if you can always find contentment just where you are, you're probably a dog. Isn't that the truth? Yes, we all get rattled, right? We all, have those difficulties, and it flusters us, and we go through our process, and we work our spiritual principles, and so we all go through difficult, dark times in our lives. There's no avoiding it, right? And I was reflecting on my greatest growth experiences, and think about this for yourself. The deepest, kind of darkest, most difficult things that we go through, at least for me, have tended to be the greatest spiritual teachers and brought forth the most wisdom in me and transformation and growth and awakening. And I think that's true for even the great master teachers of the world. I mean, look at Jesus and Buddha and even more contemporary Mother Teresa and Thich Nhat Hanh, Gandhi, all of those teachers went through very difficult times, and so do we. And all of them brought their light to the situation. They brought their wisdom, their lamp of wisdom in those dark times, and so can we. We have that opportunity. So how do we carry that lamp of wisdom through those most daunting, dark times in our lives, those difficult ones? I want to share with you a few practices that Jack Kornfield offers in this book. He has a bunch of them. It's a beautiful little book. But the three practices that I want us to dive into today are, one, finding your footing, finding firm footing. Two, practicing shared compassion. And the third one is to mindfully tend to the mind. Mindfully tend to the mind. So finding firm footing. What do we mean by that? Well, often we have our value and our dignity tied to things out here. Sometimes we tie it to our accomplishments or our achievements. Sometimes we tie it to our roles or the different ways that we offer our gifts in the world, when really our work is to tie our value and dignity back to who we are at our essence, that divine Christ light, that light of divinity within us. It's our second basic principle in unity, right? That light of divinity lives within each of us and is there to bring to the world. So tying our value and our dignity, remembering who we are at our spiritual essence. And I was reminded, there's a great quote by Michael Jordan about his ups and downs and failures and things that he goes through. He said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my basketball career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to make the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over again in my life, but I still keep going out on the court, and that's why I succeed." Yeah, we all fail, but to get our firm footing, requires us to get out there, to bring ourselves, our best selves to the world, and not to tie our intrinsic value to our successes and failures, but to remember that just being on this earth, bringing our beingness to life, is valuable to the world. And we are, as we like to say in Unity, unique, unrepeatable expressions of God. Unique, unrepeatable expressions of God. And if we don't bring that to the world, it's lost. We miss out on that. It's ours to remember to bring that, because it won't exist without us. There was a lieutenant who had trouble controlling his temper, and he was required to take an 8-week mindfulness course. And at about week 6, he goes into the grocery store in a big fat hurry. And it's one of those days that's crowded and there's long lines, and he has a full basket and he pulls up to the checkout lane, and there's a woman at the register with a baby in her arms, and she has one item. And he's already a little annoyed because he's like, why isn't she going to the express lane, right? and she should follow the rules, right? And so he's getting annoyed and all flustered. And he watches this exchange. The woman with the baby and the clerk are having this beautiful interaction. They're like oogling at the baby, and they're talking, and the line's growing back here. And he's getting more and more irritated, and he's about to blow his top, right? And he remembers his mindfulness practices, and he begins to breathe into that moment and to accept that he's triggered and that he's flooded, and to work with those flood of emotions. And he starts to practice some acceptance and breathe some more. And as he does that, some kindness is welling up in him. And he begins to notice this interaction of the women and the beautiful baby just having this very special, meaningful moment of connection and love. And so then it's his turn to get up to the clerk and to check out. And he had enough welling up in him of kindness to say, that baby was kind of cute, wasn't it? And she said, you think so? Well, thank you. That was actually my son. My husband was in the Army, and he died in the Middle East last year. And I had to go back to work. And my mother takes care of him all day. And so once a day, she comes in and goes through my line, and we have a moment of connection. Talk about a shift there, right? Finding a different perspective, right? Letting go of the judgment immediately. And that lieutenant felt that moment of shared compassion, right? He too had lost a loved one other loved ones and friends in the military. He too was hungry for that love and compassion and connection. that shifts us, finding our footing in spirit and finding that footing with a spiritual perspective shifts things for us. I took a pottery class, I don't know, last fall with my mom and son, and it was just a 2-hour thing, and we were learning to spin on the wheel, right? And I learned in that moment how important it is to center the clay right. Like, that's the whole deal, right? Is getting the clay centered on the wheel. And I was thinking about, how is that for us? You know, how centering ourselves, keeping ourselves centered on the wheel. And are we staying centered in the awareness of our intrinsic value? Are we spending time with our essence and really bringing forth that light in a way and grounding in that? You know, and are we giving ourselves that care and attention and time, and giving our difficulties that care and attention and time, such that we can stay centered in the wheel of our being, such that we can stay centered in God, or are we spinning out? You know, and if we are staying centered and we're answering yes to all those questions, then we have firm footing. That's where we find our firm footing. And then we also have to practice shared compassion, right? To bring our lamp of wisdom to those tough times. Shared compassion is so critical during those times. I know some of you I shared in my last talk, but over the last year and a half, it's been probably the most difficult season of my life. And I've gone through some trauma and loss and things way before that, but it's just been a difficult season. And I found myself, to get out of my rut or my funk, I found myself going into that comparison thing of, well, it could always be worse, right? I could be in a war zone in the Ukraine, or I could be dying of famine in Africa, or I could be, you know, fill in the blank. Have you done that before? Am I? Yeah, I'm not the only one. But I realized in working with this book that that's going into comparison. And it's not really honoring my experience or that other person's experience in the Ukraine or wherever. You know, comparison is a monkey mind symptom when we get into comparison with others. And in this case, it brings some relief and can get us out of our funk. But when we're in comparison, it's not that helpful. And what I found through the work of this book is the shared compassion. It's what's most important to bring. The shared compassion. And knowing that we all suffer loss. Jack Kornfield says, with mindfulness, our natural compassion grows. We can see that we are all carrying our own burdens of tears. You and everyone you meet are sharing some measure of the pain present on the planet. You are called upon to witness this pain in yourself and others with compassion. We're called upon to witness that pain in ourselves and each other with compassion. And I was thinking about this. I want to offer us today an opportunity to experience that shared compassion, to have a moment as a community here to experience that. And so I'm going to ask you in a minute, I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to ask you to be a little bit vulnerable here today as a community, and be willing, if you are, to raise your hand if it's a yes for you to my questions. And I want us, as we do that, to hold kind of a heart space for each other, to really hold that space of love and compassion as we witness each other. So I'm curious, if of all of you in this room, and you can answer for yourself if you're joining us online, all of you in this room in the last 2 years, how many of you have experienced the death of a family member or a close friend in the last 2 years? Yeah. Notice that most of us have experienced great loss in the last 2 years. What about more than one loss? Yeah, give love and compassion. Take a moment to send love and compassion to each of us. What about, how many of you have experienced a financial downturn in the last 2 years? Maybe a change of job or a change in finances. Yeah, a lot of us. How many of you have experienced a health challenge or an injury or a medical issue? Yeah. Welcome to the world, huh? Yeah. Okay, how many of you have experienced a difficulty with, say, a son, daughter, sibling, or parent in the last 2 years? Yeah. We are not alone. We're not alone, and we don't have to go through this alone. I mean, that's what this community also offers for us on the spiritual path, right? That love and compassion for us to walk through these difficult, dark times alone as they arise, and to bring our light, to remember who we are in the midst of it all, and to bring our light to that. That's our shared compassion. So, Jack, the other thing that we also have to do is to mindfully tend to our minds, because we can't bring that love and compassion to each other if our monkey mind is going crazy, right? And we've got all this stuff going on in our head, the judgment, the whatever, the lieutenant was a great example of that. The Buddha once said, "Who is your enemy? The mind is your enemy. Who is your friend? The mind is your friend." Yeah, our mind has the power to make up all sorts of stories about what's going on for us, and we can direct that in the way of empowering, life-fulfilling thoughts, or we can have limiting beliefs that get in our way. That's really our third basic principle in unity, right? That we create our experience through our thoughts, our feelings, and our beliefs. And so we've got to work with that principle, work with tending to our mind. And Jack points out in the book, he says, when your thoughts are racing and repetitive, remember, no one can harm you as much as your untamed mind. When you are struggling or in pain, remember, no one can help you as much as a quiet, clear, composed mind. And then he goes on to say, in fact, the two things that you are always free to do, despite your circumstances, are to be present and to be willing to love. To be present and to be willing to love. And we have to kind of tend to our mind in order to be present, to show up and be present and to be willing to love. We have to work with that mind and that third basic principle. So it's simple but not easy to do that. In order to tend to our mind, to mindfully tend to our mind, here are some things we have to do. One, we have to let go of, we have to embrace uncertainty. We have to embrace uncertainty because every moment is different. We don't know what's coming tomorrow or the next day. Things change constantly. So we have to embrace that uncertainty. We also have to not take things personally, right? Work on all the ways that we get triggered and not take things personally. We also have to remember to keep our stories in check. What story am I telling myself? What story am I telling myself? I'll just share, I'll tell on myself. I share a little story. During these difficult times, I have found myself in a narrative of it's a lot. Like, there's been a lot on my plate. It's a lot. And I've been stuck in that narrative, and I decided to shift that narrative. I'm done with that, and work with that story, because that story was coming across as a limiting belief. It was coming across heavy. Even though, if we looked at everything on my plate, yeah, it is a lot. But it wasn't serving me to be in that story, right? So we have to work with that story, and so I'm choosing a new narrative. My new narrative is, I have the strength, I have the power, I have the will, I have the wisdom to handle everything in my life. I have the strength, I have the power, I have the will, I have the wisdom to handle everything in my life. We have to choose how it is that we want to work with the stories in our head and choose our narrative. That's part of working with those basic spiritual principles of tending to the mind. The other thing to tend to the mind is also, where are we placing our focus? What are we focusing on? Really focusing on, how do we want to be and show up for this difficulty, for this darkness? How do I want to be with this? And reaping the wisdom from it, asking the right questions. What's the wisdom in this difficulty for me? And maybe even calling in some guides and, your spiritual teachers. How would my spiritual teachers guide me through this experience? Asking those kind of questions to guide us through. That's how we tend to the mind. So I want to just end with one more quote from Jack. He says, pests, drought, animals, insects, no gardeners give up. Water, fertilize, plant new seeds. Whatever you plant and tend with care will bear fruit. So let's go out this week and bear the fruit of our difficulties. Let's bear the fruit of our difficulties by finding that firm footing in our spiritual nature, by practicing that shared compassion and by mindfully tending our minds. And so it is.